Hello, welcome once again to another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, your resource for helping you break free of the stressful, dogmatic diet and exercise rat race, helping you get in the best shape of your life on your own terms. Matt Schifferly here, founder of the Red Delta Project, author of the books Fitness Independence and Smart Bodyweight Training. And speaking of smart bodyweight training, today we're talking about one of the key components that I talk about in that book, tension, muscle tension specifically, and how tension is the best medicine. If I ever create t-shirts and hoodies for the Red Delta Project, I'm going to make t-shirts that say that on the front or the back. Tension is the best medicine. And I'm not saying that lightly. And the reason is because when you look at a lot of the health issues that we're threatened by, especially with modern day living, being able to constructively apply muscle tension throughout our neuromuscular system can be one of the best forms of preventive medicine possible. And, all that stuff about looking lean and good naked and being able to perform well and feel good, that's just a nice little side benefit. But as the book Strong Medicine, that I often talk about, points out, that our use of muscular tension can have a strong ripple effect in every aspect of our health and fitness. And today we're going to explore exactly a little bit why, to kind of give you a little bit more motivation that there's more reason to do the exercises we're doing than just building muscle and burning fat, although that is also partially medicinal in its own right. So let's jump right into it. Why is the ability to contract your muscles so potent as a form of a way to keep you healthy and keep things of conditions and disease at bay? Well, the first one is your ability to contract your muscles and produce muscle tension is a huge influence to your blood sugar regulation. And your blood sugar is heavily controlled by things like glucagon and insulin, and it basically impacts everything from your ability to think straight, your health regulation, energy level, all sorts of things. And there's a lot of threat these days about blood sugar regulation, particularly things in the form of like diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is when your body no longer has the ability to produce as much or any insulin, so you can't regulate blood sugar, because every time that you eat anything, your digestive process breaks down the foods that you eat into their basic components. Think of it kind of like taking apart a Lego set, if you will. Protein gets broken down into amino acids, fats get broken down into triglycerides, and all forms of carbohydrate get broken down into polysaccharides, disaccharides, and monosaccharides, aka simple sugars. And that's what happens with everything. Everything that you eat gets broken down that way, because ultimately while we eat something and we're like, oh, I'm eating a slice of bread or I'm eating a steak, it's basically up to your body to break it down and saying, well, I know you're eating this stuff thinking it does X, Y, and Z, but I'm just going to take everything apart and use it how I want to use it. Again, like handing a Lego set to a kid and saying, look, Johnny, it's a spaceship. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want a spaceship. So they take it apart and they build a bulldozer. Well, that's basically how our body uses food. It's like, well, you may be trying to eat this to build muscle, but I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to do what I want to do with it and what I need to do with it. And a lot of that can end up in the form of regulating your blood sugar. Now, the challenge that we have these days is that it's so easy for us to overconsume any form of calories, and pretty much anything you eat can be turned into sugar, with the exception of fats. That goes through a much bigger way. But even that steak that you eat, that low carb, and you're like, oh, I just ate low carb all day. I didn't eat any sugar. Well, your body can turn that into sugar through a process called gluconeogenesis. So even if, again, your Lego set, it's like, yeah, but I didn't take in anything that looked like that. Well, if your body wants to turn it to sugar, it's going to turn to sugar. So a lot of the strategy that we have towards blood sugar regulation, you hear through the form of diet. And rightfully so. I mean, it's not going to help you if you're having trouble regulating blood sugar and diabetes if you're like chugging down liters of high fructose corn syrup laden soda and sugary coffee drinks all the time and eating a lot of a sugar, carb-laden food. So that is definitely still good advice, but it's only 1/2 of the equation, because your blood sugar is regulated not just by what you eat, but how much sugar and carbohydrate you utilize on a daily basis. And one of the biggest reasons why so many people are better off having a lower sugar and carbohydrate intake is because they have a low sugar and carbohydrate expenditure. And I'm all for bringing things down to bring things in balance by all means, but I look at it kind of like, well, you're only taking a look at 50% of the equation there. And I'm always about a multifaceted approach. Why take one shot? Like if you're a boxer, why only hit with one hand when you can give them the old 1-2 punch and really lay out a larger offensive arsenal towards what you want? And so when you apply muscle tension, you burn calories. You burn sugar. That is literally the burn you're feeling, is those chemical substrates of carbohydrate going pew, pop, 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 pop. You are burning through sugar. And the more intense your activity is, the faster your rate of caloric and sugar expenditure is. So in the quest to have the health benefits of stable, regulated blood sugar, burning sugar through producing muscle tension through almost any form of activity whatsoever, but usually more intense stuff is more related. So higher forms of intensity, forms of cardio, sprint style training, strength training is a good example. Anything that produces muscle tension will help you burn carbohydrate and sugar, help you regulate your blood sugar, and stave off a lot of the problems that come from unregulated blood sugar, such as diabetes and all the problems that come from there as well. So right off the bat, that's a big one. Like being able to regulate your blood sugar is huge just by becoming more active. The second reason why tension can be your best medicine is building up and controlling the stress around the soft tissues of your body and your joints. Joints and pressure in your knee, pressure in your elbow, pressure in your wrist, your back, your neck. All these aches and pains that we seem to deal with on a daily basis, where we wake up and we're stiff and we're sore and stuff. How do you fix all that? Muscle tension. Applying muscle tension is one of the best ways you can improve your mobility, feel limber, feel like you can just be light on your feet, put that spring back in your step, keep the stress out of your joints. All of this is from the productive use of muscle tension. And the reason for this is because your body is under constant stress 24/7. It's because we live on this planet, and this planet has this thing called gravity. And as a result, no matter what you do with your body, no matter how you relate to gravity, you're always being pulled down by the forces of gravity. And evolution's done a pretty good job of constructing our skeleton and our muscular system to be able to healthfully handle that pull of gravity, but it's not perfect because things can get in alignment, our posture can go south, our knees cave in, outwards, how we can step and walk. All of these sorts of things can effectively bring stress towards our joints, towards areas of our body that don't handle stress all that well. Here's the good news, is that you have a tissue on your body that can handle an immense amount of stress. It's almost like bulletproof. It can do so much. These are your skeletal muscles. And your muscles, when they're working well and they are holding the tension that they need to hold, they effectively take that stress that's on your body inherently through the pull of gravity and pulling it away from your joints, pulling it away from your ligaments and your tendons and all of these areas that can be so susceptible to injury and pain. And that's why when we use muscle tension in a more productive way with things like squats, push-ups, dips, and so on, then what we effectively have is we not only build up our muscles, but we also train our joints to be strong, quote unquote, strong joints. You can't make a joint stronger or more limber, as a yoga instructor once told me. It's like, Matt, I guarantee your joints are just as strong and flexible and limber as the day you were born. It's the tissues around your joints that are getting weak or stiff and tight and painful. So having the ability to skillfully manipulate muscle tension in a way to pull stress away from the joints keeps your joints resilient, healthy, you stay limber, you stay pain-free, and you also look pretty good too, because that tension in the muscles is helping to sculpt your physique, burn calories, regulate blood sugar. You see where the domino effect is coming from? All right, so we got stress around the joints. That's the other thing it heals. What's the third way tension is the best medicine? Well, we're also talking about major stress relief. And I'm not talking just the stress in your joints. I'm talking about the stress you feel from a long day at work. I'm talking about the stress that you have, that nagging ache in your upper back because you are at your desk all day long and you are just so hunched up because you're trying to get that report in on time to your boss. The everyday stress that becomes so chronic in modern day living, that is such a threat to our mental stress, emotional stress. Depression is such a big thing these days. We're prescribing all sorts of depression drugs left and right. And a large part of it is because, just like with our physical body, our mind and even perhaps our very soul is under constant stress, and there's no letting up on that stress. And any form of stress, no matter how small or minor it is, without release, builds up into catastrophic limits until something breaks. And so when we apply tension into our muscles, when we apply tension in a productive way to build ourselves up, that also creates a cascade of hormonal effects like dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, a whole bunch of other hormones just follow along, beginning with that first step of putting tension into the muscles. That is the first thing we do. It's about taking a walk after dinner to get outside and get away from the phone and the screens and everything, so we can just breathe and relax and realize that there's a lot of great things in the world, and those problems that we had at work are, in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal. You're not going to get to that kind of emotional release by sitting in front of the TV and watching the doom and gloom news. You get outside, go for a walk, get the fresh air on your face, watch the sunset, challenge your legs up that hill as you're walking along. It's emotional release. It's physical stress release. Stress is a product of energy flowing, but when it doesn't flow very well, it builds up. Think of like a river just flowing right along, right? You've got hundreds and hundreds of tons of water just flowing along this river, fine and dandy, all is fine and good. Now, let's say you put a dam in that river and it just wells up, and you don't create a release on that dam, and all that water just builds up back, and eventually it breaks through the dam. But before it does, it's creating all this stress upon the dam and all this stress on the ecosystem around it and everything. That's exactly the same thing how energy in your body and mind works. You have a lot of energy flowing through your body, flowing through your mind, but because we sit so much and our mind gets so focused on one thing, like what's going on in the news or the project at work, we interrupt the flow. Energy can flow very well in a healthy way. In martial arts, we learn that rolling with the punches, right? That's even a saying they have, roll with the punches. When you crash on a bicycle, if you can roll out of the crash, you might get maybe a minor bump or bruise and you're fine. But if you're racing along, same amount of energy, and you suddenly, bang, you just stop because you hit a tree or something, you got to go to the hospital. Same amount of energy, but the flow got interrupted. So when we apply tension throughout our muscles in any sort of physical activity, be it casual, high intensity, low intensity, what we do is we take some of that dammed up physical, emotional, mental energy, even if we're not aware of it, and we let it loose. We allow it to flow. We allow it to just have an application to it. And that's why so many people I train, they prefer to work out at the end of their workday, because they come to me and they're like, they're stressed, or they're just like, oh, what a day and everything. And afterwards they're like, oh, I feel so much better. Why? Because they put tension in their muscles. Now, note, real quick, put a pin on that note, that this doesn't happen if they just relax and stretch. Doing passive stretching where there's no tension, this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm very critical of passive stretching. when you're relaxing and you're trying to stretch out your hamstrings and everything. I've been doing that for years as a martial artist. I've never experienced any real benefit from doing that. Maybe it makes me a little looser for like a single Taekwondo class, but it never impacted my long-term flexibility, and I never really felt that loose afterwards. But everything changed when I started to do proactive stretching. Things like, instead of putting my leg up on a chair and leaning forward to stretch my hamstrings, I lift my leg up with the tension in the muscles in my hip flexor. So I'm working with the stretch. And that has done wonders for me. Why? Because I put the tension into the movement. Now that there's tension there, it has the ability to work. So anyway, back to the original story. When we have tension, we create an outlet and flow for energy, physical, mental, emotional energy. And being able to get the energy that's dammed up to flow is monstrously good for your health. Other things. What's the other thing that tension is the best medicine for? There's this little threat that as you get older, it gets much more of a big threat. It's called sarcopenia, which is essentially the term used to describe muscle loss as you get older. And sarcopenia is a massive threat to those who get older. I mean, basically every aspect of your health is influenced by the strength and size of your muscles. So as your muscles go down, all of a sudden everything becomes much worse. You're more of a risk of falls, you're more of a risk of osteoporosis, you're more of a risk of stroke, heart attack, all sorts of other issues that we usually associate with aging. These are largely connected to how much muscle we have. Why? Because muscle is tension containers. It's like biological Tupperware for muscular tension. So the more tension you put into your muscles, the bigger and more robust they need to be. That's reactive to tension. Your muscles aren't going to get bigger just for any old reason. They are a functional tissue. So by placing tension in the muscle, it doesn't even have to be a lot of tension, but placing tension in muscle helps to maintain its size and strength as you get older. And if there's anything that I can recommend to improve your quality of life as you get older, it's keep your strength, keep your muscle. It's better than a retirement account in many ways, because what good is being retired if you're always sick and hurt and injured all the time and you're in a hospital bed anyway? Keep your muscles strong. And how do you do that? You apply tension through them. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, yes, of course, a big one. Talking about mental energy, right? Acute mental concentration. Okay. Tension is a product of the mind. We get very concentrated in the thinking that, well, it's a physical thing, right? We see the muscle flex. We see the body moving around. But the reality is muscular tension is the end product of the neuromuscular system. In other words, your brain, the very gray matter sitting between your ears, is the factory that produces muscle tension. And especially these days with modern medicine, people are living longer, people are living more high-quality lifestyles well into their golden age, and we're seeing a lot of threats of mental issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, threats on the mental neurological degradation side of things. And a lot of the scientists are saying, well, if you want to increase your chances of having a healthy mind, give your brain something to do. And oftentimes they say things like join a club or an activity, do crossword puzzles. Basically, use your mind like it's a muscle. If you don't train your muscles, they wither away with that sarcopenia. Same thing with your mind. If you're just sitting in front of the TV all day, your mind can atrophy, and your neurological capacity can go with it. So if you want to keep your mental acuteness as you get older, then being able to use your muscular tension is a very good way to do that, because you don't put tension in your muscles because you exercise. You put tension in your muscles because of your thought and concentration. And I cover this more in detail in my book, Smart Bodyweight Training. That's why I call it Smart Bodyweight Training, because your mind is really the center of it all. But by concentrating your thoughts into how you use your muscle tension to do something like throw a side kick or shoot a basketball or something that takes some measure of skill is really a mental challenge for you. And as such, it will improve your mental capacities and keep your mental sharpness as you get older so that you're staving off the effects of dementia, maybe even Alzheimer's. There's a lot we still don't know about it, but one thing is for sure, keeping your mind active as well as your body is super critical for your long-term health and well-being. And being able to use your tension in a productive way, in a skillful way, goes a long way for that. Now, last little point with all of this, I've covered a lot of great things here about what muscle tension can do for your health and well-being. But like I said, tension is the best medicine. And like all forms of medication, it can be either helpful or harmful depending on the dose, depending on how well you use it. Like if you're being active and you're overdoing the activity, or you're trying to force too much weight on your exercise, that amount of tension that you're generating can now become somewhat problematic. So exercise can be just as harmful if you overdo it. So if you're getting into exercise for the first time in a long time, take it easy. The thing about muscle tension is any amount of it is beneficial. There's no like bottom level that you have to produce. Light activity, light applications of muscle tension still will work. And if you haven't been doing hardly anything and you start doing something, even though it doesn't seem like very much, it's still productive. It's still something that is beneficial and a step in the right direction. Also, with that said, is like having a prescription from a doctor or a medical professional, I highly recommend looking into someone who is a trainer or a coach or someone who can essentially like prescribe applications of tension for you, who can say, this is a good thing to do, this is a good exercise to do, I wouldn't recommend doing this because of your knee surgery or whatever. Because having someone who can look at what you bring to the table and how you can use tension in the most productive way possible with as little risk will be much more effective in the long run. So there you go. Tension is the best medicine. I'm going to start using that phrase all the time now. You're going to hear it podcasts on my Instagram, on my YouTube channel, and I should have put it in my book, but you can check out my book, Smart Bodyweight Training, on Amazon. Paperback and Kindle versions are available. Let me know if you have questions, reddeltaproject@gmail.com, and best of luck with your training this week. Talk to you guys next week. Till then, be fit, live free.